This is our 20th segment on this series on creative writing. I had said in a previous segment that I will talk about reading, which is the other side of writing. It's a very important topic, and I want to spend a bit of time talking about reading in a later segment. But today I want to talk mainly about the art of making narratives, because you have a story and you have chosen a narrator, whether the narrator is an omniscience who is present everywhere in the story, or you have chosen the first person narrator who has limited access to the story. Whichever method you have chosen, you will have to have this story moving forward. Now, the story will not move forward by itself. There are certain skills involved in getting your story move ahead. Now, there is a romantic notion of writing which argues that too much reflection can make your writing artificial and contrived. I don't want to argue against that, because I'm hoping that one day you will be able to write spontaneously. That is what we all aim for. But in the meanwhile, when we are starting to write, we have to master certain skills, accumulate certain amount of knowledge, and inculcate certain attitudes. And this is what we have been trying to do in the segments we have done so far. Now, when you read several short stories, and I hope that you are reading a lot of short stories now, you will find that writers use certain methods of making their stories move. And among the methods, you will find the use of summary, the use of scene, the use of dialogue. Now, I want to talk about these three methods today. Let's begin with summary. Now, when we talk about summary, generally we mean a paraphrase or a synopsis. A paraphrase of a story, a synopsis of a chapter, and so forth. But here, when we use the word summary, we mean a certain kind of skill that is involved in moving your story ahead. Now, you have to pay attention to making summaries in your stories. A summary is a compressed bit of writing. Some writers like to begin their story with a summary. Now, this is very, very easy to do. It is very easy to begin your story with a summary that gives a background to the narrative. Now, summary at the beginning is a risky business, because your summary, your beginning, must be something that engages the reader. It must be bright, it must be something that pulls the reader into the narrative. Now, the story that I discussed with you, my story, Gamaliel's Woman, it begins with a summary. And I say at the beginning, Mrs. Gamaliel died in a dream one fine Saturday morning. Now, that did not come to me easily. It came to me after several experimentation with the beginning. But finally it did, and I think it's a good summary of the story. It is compressed, it is brief, it is economical, and it takes us into the narrative and creates a certain kind of anticipation in the reader. It's not necessary for summaries to appear at the beginning. As you write, you will know how to use summary discriminately. Summaries should also be used for bridging the narrative, pacing the narrative. It can come in the beginning, it can come anywhere in the narrative, but you have to be very clever. You should know when to compress your narrative and when to expand your narrative. And when you expand your narrative, you move into the area of creating a scene. Now, these two methods, summary and scene, are very, very important because they tell you about two very important ways of writing. One is telling. In a summary, you tell the reader. In a scene, you show. Now, there is a significant difference between telling and showing. Readers like to be shown. They don't like to be told. Whether it is a piece of fiction or it is a film, you do not want some narrator to be telling you all the time. You want to be shown what is happening to people and what is happening in the story. Now, scene is a place where you show. A scene is something very similar to a play. Now, in fact, the word scene comes from plays. Plays are divided into acts and scenes. In a scene, you have characters who are shown in the process of thinking and feeling. In a scene, you have a description of the situation. Now, I want to mention the use of description. You have to be very careful not to indulge too much in description because the modern reader does not want too much description. Because we live in a world in which you have documentary films, you have cinema, you have travel. People know about places. So what you are required to do is just to drop a hint. Have a bright telling detail, and that will evoke the place. Now, a scene is a very important component of your story. And the more scenes you have, the better it is. Your scenes need not be too lengthy. I would say that one page, a couple of paragraphs of scene, at the most a couple of pages, but not too long, because you must vary your writing. After the scene, you must have a summary and another technique that I'm going to talk about a little later, and that is use of dialogue. Our scene is something that you have to develop certain skills to evoke. Now, a story like Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants is a very good example because the whole story is a scene and it is conducted in a dialogue form. Now, I would like you to read Hemingway's stories. I would like you to read many other stories by Hemingway because you can learn a lot from Hemingway. There's another story by Hemingway, The Killers, which is conducted through dialogue. Now, if you use just dialogue, you have to use all aspects of narratives, developing character, developing action, evoking place, and giving a sense of time, all that in dialogue. And you have to be particularly clever in order to do that. Now, when I started writing, I used to have a great deal of difficulty writing dialogue because I was writing about people who were using another language. They were using Hindi, they were speaking in Hindi. And what I had to do in dialogue is to translate what the characters were saying in Hindi into English. And you lose a lot. You lose a great deal. One of the things you lose is the wit and the humor. That cannot easily be translated into another language. So what I did was I tried to avoid using dialogue. And that was not very good for my writing. Because then writing becomes all summary and scene and no dialogue. But when I started writing in Hindi, dialogues came very naturally to me. And now when I write my novels, there are pages and pages of sparkling dialogue. And that has also influenced my writing in English. Now I don't have that same difficulty with dialogue. Now dialogue is the most exciting part of your narrative, because when the reader opens your story and sees pages of dialogue, he is easily drawn to it. He wants to read. It's easy to read dialogue, and you can read dialogues very quickly, but you can use dialogue for a clever purpose of depicting character. You can evoke a scene through dialogue, because characters can talk about a scene. You can evoke history through dialogue, because again, characters can mention historical time. Now, learn to use dialogue in order to depict character, and you can tell a lot about people through dialogue. You can tell the background of characters through dialogue. You can give an indication of their age. You can give an idea of their education, their social standing. But it is also a very good place to raise tension. When people talk, they argue. Conflicts develop, and your story gains tension. Now, I want you to cultivate the habit of trying out dialogue. And for that, you got to be very alert and perceptive. You got to listen to people. There's one place where eavesdropping is allowed. When you're traveling on train or bus, listen to what people are saying and try to catch nuances of their speech, and keep a writer's notebook in which you record the conversation. Now, in the next segment, of course, I'll be talking about reading, which is a very important topic for us.